It is good to be here with you all and to recall, for those of you who were able to be with us a year ago, being able to be in person in the PAB and at Parker House, and just getting to connect in the ways that we as humans prefer to do. So this is not the ideal way to be getting together now, and yet this is one way that will allow us at least to have some communication, and I look forward to being able to take some questions and help you understand, where things are at the college right now, how we're doing. I want to say that, for me, it was certainly not optimal in my first year to have the sudden change that was brought about by the COVID pandemic. And at the same time, in the months that preceded that, I was really grateful and gratified to get to know the campus, to get to know many people. And, this is something that, I'm somebody who likes to be in with people. For those of you who aren't in Portland and haven't been able to be in Portland, my hope with Hugh was to be able to travel and get to see you, and we will take rain checks on those kinds of encounters for the future. But I wanted to just share with you, since it's been now a year plus, a good amount since I first arrived, some of what I've seen at Reid, and give you a sense of where things are now. So first of all, I came to Reid because I am a champion of the liberal arts, and Reid is an amazing liberal arts college. I came to Reid also because I recognize that Reid is a place where people do care for one another and care about the futures and present lives of our students. And for anybody who does this kind of work, and for someone like me who had been for decades working with students in the classroom, I can say that the students are really the best part of being at Reid. And our students are inspirational. They care very deeply about learning. They're curious, they're creative, they're endlessly fascinating to meet, and they bring a great deal of joy to me, to the faculty, to one another, because of that excitement. I was in a meeting with a group of faculty just the other day on Zoom. And so, faculty are all windows, and it was a meeting with a group of student leaders. And every time a student would speak, faculty leaned toward the screen and beamed. And I could see that pride and love and high regard that our faculty have for students. And that those connections, those relationships are really at the very heart of what we do at this college. So, something that I knew coming into Reid is that we are known for the seriousness of the academic program. And at the same time, the seriousness it has to be joined up with love and with a kind of passion for ideas. And at the same time, something that I've seen Reid doing successfully in recent years is also to think about the students as whole people, to help students imagine even more fully their lives beyond Reid. I think that we've just been doing remarkable work in these areas, and also bringing in really talented people to help with this work. I'm delighted in particular, and Hugh and other members of our leadership team share the delight in welcoming a couple of new people to the table at the Vice President Dean level. We have a new Dean of the Faculty, Kathy Olson, who comes from a long time work as a faculty member in psychology. And so she brings a great energy to that role. We have Carnell McConnell-Black, who's our new Vice President for Student Life. And he's also really interested in thinking about how to support the whole student and how to help us contribute to student success. So the things that we know make Reid special are the amazing faculty who come to Reid because they know that they can be teachers and scholars and work with students who will also challenge them and help them think more deeply about their fields and disciplines. Those connections between the faculty and students, the connections across disciplines, these are things that really create an environment where at any given time you can walk across campus and people are talking about their class that they just had, or talking about the projects and plans that they have, and imagining together how to do really profound work. So this is transformational. And I know that for many of you, your Reid experience was instrumental in helping you get to the next stage of your life. And I hope that you remember fondly things that happened in classes and connect back with your faculty and people here at Reid. So I know that as a somebody who I taught English in liberal arts colleges for 25 years, and we'll teach again. That's definitely something that I long to do. But I still hear from students going back decades, and that's deeply meaningful to our faculty and to everybody here at Reid to be able to stay connected with our students. So I want to say that the way that Reid is situated right now is very strong. We are at a time, we're living in a time when there are many people who question the value of higher education. They question even more the value of the kind of small private education that we offer at a liberal arts college. And I think that we are able to do some things that really will help to make the world better. We may be small. We also, though, send our students out to do work in many areas where their impact will be great. And so in helping students think critically and reimagine the world and help us all think about the issues that we face and challenge one another. This is a learning environment, and we set the stage for students to learn throughout their lives. So what does that mean for us in this particular moment where we are unable to think about plans in the way that we did a year ago? There's so much that seems uncertain and that is challenging for us during the COVID pandemic. One thing I know for sure is that the college will survive. We will emerge from this strong and stronger, and that we've come together as a community in ways that I think will really stand us in good stead as we weather whatever we need to face in months and years to come. So we've been able to do some things that seem to defy gravity. Most significantly, we were able to bring students back to campus for the fall semester. Not all students have been able to come back, and the hope is to get all of our students back together at some point in the not too distant future. We have international students, both first-year students who are just joining us, and also students who are continuing who were unable to get visas and be able to be on campus. We have students whose health concerns meant that it was not going to be possible for them to be on campus or to travel to Portland. What we have been able to do is to put together a hybrid model where about half of our classes are online, the other half have combinations of in-person, online instruction. About 100 of our faculty are teaching in person in some form or another. We have on campus now over 1,300 students, 1,349 students It's about 50 students fewer than we had last year, which represents a drop. But that being said, many of our peer institutions have experienced much sharper drops, and that is something that we were able to avoid because we were able to come up with a responsible plan to be back on campus safely. So the things that we've been trying to balance as we put together our COVID response plan was to balance a demand for in-person mentoring, teaching, and learning. At the same time, we've been, it's been a high priority to make sure that we create the conditions for health and safety. And then we've been guided throughout in thinking about equity. So we know that the circumstances of the pandemic, like all circumstances, affect different people differently. And we've been thinking about students' health and well-being, the challenges that various configurations offer for learning, and really trying to think about how to make sure that our students who are on campus now are able to thrive and the students who are remote are able to feel connected. It's complicated. This has been one of the most challenging years of all of our lives, I know. And it's taken many minds and hearts and a lot of energy to get the plan in place that we have. So I will say that the plan upholds our educational responsibilities to our students. What we do, the way we do it are important. We need to believe in young people, and we hope that the students that are here continue to do what we see them doing, which is to be mindful of the need to look out for one another, to wear face coverings, to maintain social distance, to observe hand washing. We're creating the conditions where all of this can happen, and so far what we're seeing is really heartening. So I would say that something that is really clear to me in all of this is the way that Reedies care about one another. And that's to me been the kind of rocket fuel to make this possible at Reid, which is that there's a sense of social responsibility, of accountability, and those features of Reid are really helping us get through this COVID time. So I wanted also to say that another feature of the time that we're living in is a time, this is a time of so much polarization, but also a great deal of energy around thinking about inclusion and diversity and equity. And I'm really gratified to be able to work with many people who are committed to helping to make changes and rethink the way that we do things to ensure that we are as equitable and inclusive as possible. And in particular, I know that many of you know the work of Mary James, who is our Dean for Institutional Diversity. Mary's been doing a lot of things really, well, going back to the time when I first met her, including the work that she did in making sure that the process that led to my being hired was thinking about eliminating bias and ensuring that people who were anybody who was going to take this position would care about equity, inclusivity, diversity. Mary has been doing a lot of work in terms of thinking about ways to connect students, faculty, and staff in conversations about inclusivity, and also in thinking through the ways to get departments and faculty to think about their processes and to think about what they can be doing to make sure that they are being as supportive as possible. And so all of this work is part of the work that we're doing for student success. And I see really great things ahead for us. It's a time when we want to get things done. It's a time of action, and we're committed to that at Reid. So I want to give now Hugh some time to talk about the work that he's been doing, which has been, I mean, to say that Hugh has stretched and taken on roles that would have been utterly unforeseen at the beginning of this year even is an understatement. Hugh managed the COVID task force and also one of the 4 working groups that put together the plan. He also is co-chairing the COVID-19 risk assessment group, along with Kathy Olson, the new dean of the faculty. And so Hugh, I know that many of you are curious about the nuts and bolts of what's going on with our COVID-19 plan. And so I'll give Hugh a chance to talk about that, and then we'll field some of the questions that have been coming in. So Hugh?
Thanks, Audrey. Yes, it has indeed been interesting, and we've all learned new skills. So I will just take you through this plan. I think some of you know a great deal about it, others maybe not so much, and so some of this will be repetitive for some and brand new for others, and I expect we'll dust up some questions. Although I think the most important thing we're doing is, of course, is just what Audrey was speaking about. So the challenge of the spring and the summer was to create a plan for a situation we'd never encountered. But the opportunity of doing this at Reid was to work with a group eager to put the educational mission first and be able to turn the college's relative financial strength to implement an effective plan. So we've been operating this plan that you can find on the website. If you just search Reid COVID, it'll come up for 7 weeks. With the Dean of the Faculty, as Audrey mentioned, I co-chair a group, the COVID Risk Assessment Group, that meets weekly and communicates frequently to evaluate our plan, to assess the situation on campus, and to recommend any changes in what we're doing. So we're generally and cautiously pleased with the way that things have gone, but of course we do remain vigilant. The past few weeks, we've spent time gradually reopening spaces on campus for operation, notably the sports center just for students. We're of course eager to help students, particularly first-year students, forge valuable connections with fellow students, find organizations on campus to join, and to keep their bodies healthy. Campus physical space is somewhat altered. We spent a lot of time this summer measuring spaces, trying to assign roughly 35 square feet per person for any space where groups would gather. So everything's very spread out, as I think we're all getting used to at this point. We reduced the capacity that we would welcome to residence halls, only offering accommodation in single rooms. So some of those rooms are really quite large, as you might remember. We set aside McNaughton entirely for isolation of anyone on campus who tests positive for the virus. I should say any students who test positive for the virus. We constructed 3 tents for classroom instructions. They're behind Elliott Hall, between Elliott and the Canyon. And a 4th very large tent in front of Commons for dining. I mean, that tent is 8,000 square feet. So sort of like the tent some of you've seen for reunions. I really am sorry that one of our decisions meant that we further limited campus population in not allowing visitors, including our alumni. So I think what I'm going to do now is just review more or less like we do every week in the risk assessment group in the 4 areas of assessment. So number 1, public health. Number 2, campus health. Number 3, personal behaviors. And then finally, campus supplies. So for public health, public health, we're very fortunate to be in a state with really terrific health authority, and a county with very good health professionals as well. And we get a lot of good information. I think we've watched with some concern as cases in Oregon have gone up again in recent weeks, and we'll continue to watch that very carefully. Campus health, a lot of this will be about testing and just some quick terminology for those of you who aren't waist deep in this. So surveillance testing is testing in the absence of symptoms. Diagnostic testing is testing when symptoms are present, and exposure testing is testing for people who've been near people, have had close contact with people who tested positive for the virus. So to date, we've administered over 5,000 surveillance tests since September 1 and have had 6 positive results. This testing is really the major cost in our pandemic response. Of those 5,000 tests, 5 of the 6 had no symptoms consistent with COVID. So this issue of asymptomatic folks carrying the virus that we all know about is present. There are 4 tasks we've had to master to implement surveillance testing. Testing supplies, big problem over the summer, as you all heard. Administration, who gives the tests, where do we give the tests? Tracking, linking the test to the test taker, getting information back from the lab and to the test taker, and laboratory response, how quickly the lab returns the results from the test. And that's something, of course, we have no control over. We're in good shape now on all those measures. I saw one question that came in earlier, which is something I wondered about at the beginning of this too. Couldn't we have our chemistry and biology labs conduct the testing? Unfortunately, the answer is no. The federal certification is required, a CLIA certification. So I wish that would have been true. So with modest numbers of cases, we've had success in doing our own contact tracked testing tracing to date, supplementing that done by the county. So the students are pretty responsive, and they share information about the ways they've behaved or sometimes misbehaved in the days when they were likely able to spread the virus. Student life and facilities have been able to move students quickly into isolation spaces in McNaughton Hall and clean anything impacted. As you can imagine, that moving is complicated. We've had 1 or 2 students in the isolation residence hall, that's McNaughton. So that's mostly been empty. I think for those of you who lived in McNaughton, that's probably a kind of a sad thought to be there all by yourself. And we've worked hard to help those students feel supported. A major recent step is that we've hired a public health coordinator, someone with a background in epidemiology and who's worked in public health settings, and that's been enormously valuable and has helped us sort of audit our testing program and ramp up what we're able to do in contact tracing. So that's campus health. Third area, personal behavior and compliance. This is something I think folks were very concerned about as colleges imagined reopening. And it was an idea of one of the faculty members on the committee to do a weekly survey of community members and ask them what they see on campus. That's been very valuable. It's a great source of information about what's going on, a source of good ideas. And generally what's being reported is pretty good compliance. Most of these students really want to be back on campus and not in their parents' basements. We're not seeing evidence of the large parties that have caused outbreaks at other schools. We know some students and other community members who are not consistent with mask wearing and social distancing. That's hard for all of us. In most cases, I would say virtually all, when we have to have conversations with folks who are not in compliance, those result in genuine recognition of error and risk to do better. Fourth area, campus supplies. That was a big concern early on as well. And while the smoke from the fires did create a temporary lack of N95 and KN95 masks, we've generally kept up with cleaning supplies. The physical spaces on campus have worked well. Teaching in the tents was disrupted by the smoke, and we wonder if it's going to be disrupted by the cold, and we do have some alternatives available. The extraordinary physical plant staff has kept up with a really rigorous and enhanced cleaning schedule. And they've had training in PPE so they can keep themselves safe. So that's the kind of assessment we'll do. You can find on the website how we communicate about this. We have archived on the website weekly updates. We send them out every Friday afternoon. The one from this week just went up a couple hours ago. So if you're curious at any point on what's going on campus, you can go to that resource. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. And so let me just end my COVID with a very brief assessment. So our greatest risk from the virus is likely from off campus, as our incidence on campus right now is low. Our largest areas of development for the future are, as I've mentioned, increase numbers of staff who are able to help us with contact tracing. We're going to, I think, really get that done quickly. Communication, increasing trust and people's ability to assess our situation. One step that we'd like to have is a dashboard. You've seen them at other colleges. We have not developed that yet, and we will really very soon. Another area is just to increase understanding of what happens after a positive test. How is contact tracing done? Who gets contacted in that process? Of course, continued works to encourage safe behaviors and to respond to any evidence, which has been very small, of deliberately poor behavior. And this work, it's the classic balance that Reid has always had between education, enforcement, and the essential activities that draw students here, academic, extracurricular. So our compliance remains higher for our college-age population, and our students seem to be valued being back on campus. And fundamentally, cultivating that spirit is the most important tool in responding to any outbreak. So that's my COVID update. I promised a brief sort of what does this mean for the college and reference to my day job. So as I wrote to a number of you last spring, the challenges posed to the college really are significant, and they include financial challenges. With somewhat lower enrollments, increased financial aid as families respond to the disruption of this pandemic, and the significant cost of COVID response, the college faces a gap between revenues and expenditures of about $10 million this year. So with the strength of many decades of support and careful management, we can see our way through this year. However, these gaps in between revenue and expenditures exist in out years to the nearest we can tell. So here we go. With that in mind, fundraising is focused on generating support for operations through the annual fund, delivering funding for scholarships for our financial aid office. And I'm so grateful to all of those of you who can participate in these efforts and support the college, and keep in mind the maxim of our election time: give early and give often. So with that, I think my next task, and I'm looking at, I've got instructions here, is to get Audrey back on the line here with me, and we're going to go through the questions that have come up. So I'm going to go through these in some kind of order as they came in. So Audrey, maybe we could have a conversation, and you could take the lead with this first question of will we be reducing tuition as a few other colleges have done?
Right. I do think that the colleges that have reduced tuition have done so when they're able to only offer online courses, with an acknowledgement that there may be advantages to doing so, and with the expenses possibly being reduced at the colleges. That, even saying that, I see at colleges that are similarly situated to ours, and also some that are even resourced at greater levels than Reid is, that for colleges that are online, the deficits are much greater than our deficits, and they've resulted in letting go staff and furloughing people, and we have not done that. So our costs have not gone down, and instead our costs have gone up. And so there's a long way of saying, no, we're not planning on reducing tuition, and we plan to keep offering the high quality academic programs that we do at Reid, and then also keeping the community together so that we're here to support one another.
And of course, for those who face hardships in this pandemic, this is where our financial aid program will step in. So.
Correct. And I guess that's an important feature too, which is that we remain committed to meeting student need, and we don't want by any means to come out of this in any position to not continue to do that.
International students, how are they doing COVID during this time? So Audrey, I think you're up to date on that.
Yeah, well, these are really difficult times for everyone in the, as we watch what's been happening with immigration policies, both here and in other countries. We very much want to bring our students who are needing to stay abroad, or in their home countries, we want to bring them to Reid. We have international students who are on campus. Some who have traveled to be here from countries where that's possible, and also a good number of students who are continuing students who stayed on campus over the summer. And so I would say we need to keep reaching out and working closely with our international students. We have some great students who do peer mentoring with international students, and reports that we're getting are helping us think about what we're going to need to do differently in the spring. One thing that we've sought to do with the curriculum is to make sure we offer a good number of classes at teaching times that won't be in the middle of the night for our international students. And so, when I hear stories of some international students who are taking their classes at 3 in the morning and having very strange sleep schedules, I know that that's not sustainable. So the school's very much trying to work to see what we can do to make sure that our international students have the best possible experience, and to help them feel connected to the college, even though they are not able to be on, even though all of our international students are not able to be with us on campus right now.
Great. There are a couple of questions about who's living in the dorms. Maybe I'll jump into that one. We have 687 students living in the residence halls. We agreed to house up to 800, so we may have some come back on campus in the spring. We'll see. That leaves the balance, roughly a similar size group of people that are living in Portland. This is obviously somewhat larger than usual. How many of, there was a question related, which is how many of those are coming back and forth. And I would, I don't have those numbers. It's complicated. Audrey gave you the breakdown of how classes are taught. And those classes can be taught different ways, different weeks. But I think my best guess is somewhere between a third and a half of those people might be coming on campus in any given day. And that is why, of course, we are testing those off-campus students as well as the on-campus students. There was a somewhat related question, which is what are we going to do about Paideia? We are going to have a virtual Paideia this year. That planning is ongoing in student life, and I look forward to learning more about it, as I know you do. Audrey, I think there's a question here that I think wants some amplification on the how we're responding to Black Lives Matter movement. What are we doing to make Reid more inclusive and even accountable?
So there's work going on multiple fronts to think through the issues that have been raised by the Black Lives Matter movement. And these are not new issues by any means, nor is the Black Lives Matter movement new. It's been around for a few years, and we've been learning from it, and also learning from so much of what we've been experiencing in these past months. So I mentioned the work that Mary James is doing, and part of that, as I said, is to expand to make sure that we're representing the students, faculty, and staff. So this year, last year, a new student committee on diversity was created that works in conjunction with the faculty committee on diversity. And this year, we've also instituted a new staff committee on diversity with the idea that these groups can also coordinate their efforts. I know committee work doesn't sound like it's the most action oriented. So let me be clear. The faculty committee on diversity has put out a call to departments to work to do climate assessments within the departments and they're offering to help them with develop the tools to do this, to think through the way that their curriculum is supporting this work. There's real thoughtfulness around interrogating many of our practices and processes to think about how Reid can become an even more anti-racist institution. And we have so many students who are current students who are raising voices in various forums to help us see the areas where we need to keep doing work. And also we've been, I will say, quite successful in recent years in beginning to develop processes for faculty searches that will make sure that we have diverse pools and that we're able to really be thoughtful about how to diversify the faculty. And so, something that Mary has reported as a result of this work is that we're also being very thoughtful about the mentoring of faculty we bring in. And so we are successful in retaining those faculty. And that's going to be really important as we continue forward with these efforts on campus. But there's real sense that we know that students who are on campus now, and I know that many of you, when you were on campus, you want to see things happen, you want to see changes. And this is a time when we need to make things happen. And so we're not going to only talk, we want to get things done. And that's a commitment. I will also note, and this is that at our most recent Board of Trustee meeting, we put together a plenary session on inclusion and belonging, and there were representatives from the faculty and also Carnell, Kathy, Mary talked about the models that we use to think about how to map out change at our campus. We had a faculty member representing the CRESS program, the Comparative Race and Ethnicity Studies program, come and talk about how that program is evolving. And so there was real excitement, I think, in the discussions. And so having the trustees also engage in these discussions is a piece of what we're doing to try to keep moving this all forward.
Thanks, Audrey. I would just add very briefly, I'm so grateful to the Alumni Board for their work in this space. I look forward to continuing that partnership. A couple of questions on testing, maybe I'll jump into those. We've had 6 cases identified since September 1. That's basically a test a week, so 1 positive test for about 1,000 tests that we've done. Are we using antibody tests right now? We're mostly using a PCR saliva test. We're actually looking at the possibility of an antigen test, not an antibody test, for the second semester. There's lots of logistical and other issues to work through with that. Sort of related, I suppose, is dining hall food available? Yes, very much so. And I should have mentioned that. Bon Appetit has just done a spectacular job rethinking how they deliver food. There's an app you can order takeout food and just swing by and pick up a bag with your food. You can also go into the dining hall, get food. You can sit down, albeit at sort of very few table space, very far apart with plexiglass in the middle. I think the food's been great. I've been over there most days. I'm sure the students are getting tired of it like they always do. And that's worked out surprisingly well, and really Bon Appetit has just been heroic. Maybe, Audrey, I'll start a question about COVID and science lab courses, and you can pick it up. So I think one of the reasons that we ended up working so hard to open was the importance of laboratory science on campus. One of the members of the risk assessment group is a laboratory scientist herself, and they've been really eager to bring students back into the labs and, of course, to do their own research, bring their own postdocs back in the labs. And we've worked through with them sort of detailed plans on how they're going to be able to do laboratory work safely, which basically means that the faculty are working longer hours, right? So whereas they might have had one lab, now they might have 2 or 3 labs spread out over a day. So Audrey, I know you've been in touch with some of these folks too. So.
Yeah, I will just say that it's true that getting students back on campus to be able to make use of the resources on campus has been a priority, and the lab scientists have been really active in thinking through how to have, how to subdivide sections to have safe distance within the labs. I'll say too that the small discussion classes in, say, the humanities, my area, and social sciences. We have a number of faculty teaching across disciplines, teaching in spaces that would be surprising to you, like the chapel, right, or in volume, spread out really big in the lecture, really broadly in the lecture hall, or in classrooms, sometimes with many students in class and then some other students on screen who are participating remotely. So there's been a lot of creativity in terms of the ways in which faculty have put together their classes, and just there's real there's a lot of innovation that has gone into this.
Sorry, I'm going to be muting because my wife is teaching voice lessons on Zoom, so you may hear singing. In any case, how will the pandemic impact enrollment for fall 21, or what's the plan? Well, of course, we hope the plan is that the students will come back, and I think one of the promises that we very much wanted to keep to the students was to offer a plan that would bring them back and that would encourage students considering Reid in the future to consider signing on to a going concern. We are going to be working extremely hard. This is Milian Trulove and his team at admissions to reach out online mostly to encourage people to enroll in Reid. And Audrey, I thought there was this great thing that happened with the faculty over the summer and encouraging students to come to Reid. And I think you know more about that than I do.
Oh, just the efforts that the faculty made to help recruit the class for this year. My understanding is that there's a lot of work of the same kind going on for in thinking about recruiting for next year. But over 60 faculty participated in online forums, had special office hour sessions for the students who were had accepted and were planning to come to Reid. So both in terms of the place where we were still recruiting in late March and April, there were efforts by faculty to show what a Reid education can look like and feel like by taking part in these online forums, and then also reaching out to students individually, but with these office hours. I think that another thing that I think will be of interest to many of you is that we did end up enrolling that first year class over the summer so that we could get the balance of classes right, and also put students in pods. So we have, for the first time, living learning kinds of situations for students, so that students in their Hugh 110 sections, their conferences can be living close together and maybe have one or more of their classes together, both to reduce the exposure and contact to lots and lots of people, but also to give them a way to be connected and make friends. And I ran into a group of students who were having lunch outside of Commons and was talking to them about their experience in their pod. And they were all from different parts of the country and were saying that in their experience, this was helping them make friends, and they were feeling very positive about it. We will be assessing that. And I think we can all imagine that that this won't be utopian for everyone, but that's something that is another something that we're trying, and that may be something that we continue even after COVID.
There are a series of questions about sort of what's going on in Portland, and maybe concerns about violence as well, particularly violence from the far right. Let me say on the election, we're working really hard to put the election in context for students. We've got a wonderful panel that includes alumni as well as faculty. I think it's called Start Making Sense instead of Stop Making Sense. And we're, of course, working hard to encourage students to vote. Portland's been much in the news. I would say sort of much used by the news. It is indeed a city that's been in a really interesting conversation about what equity means and how do we make this a great place to live. That conversation has been unpleasant at times. And I think all of us who live here are wrestling with what that means. The impacts on campus have been interesting. There are certainly faculty, students, staff who are at the protests regularly. They show up when I see them looking pretty tired from that effort. We had one event on campus and it was a really lovely event. Black Lives Matter organizing group stopped by to celebrate and remember the effort of Talesian, and I'm sorry, his last name is flown out of my head, which is horrible, but the Reid graduate who defended the young Black woman from the knife-wielding crazy person who ultimately killed Talesian on a MAX train a couple years ago. It was a lovely ceremony on campus. So there are these heartfelt moments that I think get lost, frankly, in the coverage of this. So Audrey, I know you've thought a lot about this.
Yeah, I will say that we are all getting contact from friends who are in other parts of the country asking if we're okay, if Reid is okay, and of course nobody's okay right now. These are times that are really hard. But as those of you who live in Portland and in the area know, the protests are mostly in downtown, and we do have community members who go there. And we also, in the work that we're doing on campus to think through how to take up the call of Black Lives Matter and make sure that we're taking these matters seriously on campus. We're affected by this in the work that we're doing on campus on a regular and even daily basis. And so we are thinking through the ways that, so we don't have police. And so as we think about police reform actions or the actions that seek to abolish the police, we're not a campus that has that model. And instead we do have the model of community safety, which is thinking about things from a community care point of view. And even there, we're looking closely to be sure that their policies and practices are as based on equity and free from bias as possible. And I will say that Carnell McConnell Black has been working really closely with community safety and with students on campus to really make sure that we are able to do as well as possible in that space. So I would say that this is, we think about the election and the post-election as unpredictable times, and having been on campuses where the effects of the last election were the last presidential election, really brought the community into spaces where we were trying to make sense of what happened and what it meant and what it would mean for the future. Particularly in terms of a lot of what was being said about immigration and anti-immigration. Those discussions will continue and take place at the college. And it's one of the good things about working around people who do research in these areas and students who are also conducting research, that we take part most significantly in contributing by learning, by thinking about ways that we can help our students go out and do good work in the world.
Well, I think we can unfortunately just have one more question, and I'm going to end maybe on a somewhat positive note, which is what are the positive things that we're going to take out of the way we're operating now that might impact the way we're operating in the future? And I will just add one, and I know Audrey has more thoughts here, but I did a panel with others for parents of entering students. And we do an orientation every year for parents. It's a wonderful event. However, of course, it's limited to parents who can travel here. And it frankly was a really good way to engage parents of every single entering student. It was a more equitable approach. I think we were able to transmit information effectively. And of course, we could record it for people who weren't there. So I think there's some things like that that'll be better, cheaper, faster, actually. And Audrey, the final word.
Great. Thank you so much, Hugh. So I've been thinking a lot about the things that I want to hold on to when we get out of these strange days that we find ourselves in. And something that I'll say when I walk around campus and I see students, staff, colleagues, I am so glad to see people in person. And that excitement to be able to ask a student, how's this going for you? How are your classes? What are you thinking right now? It makes me all the more committed to the value of our face-to-face encounters. I want to remember that. I want to always remember how precious that is and take that forward when we get out of this. But also, I had said earlier that I'm a champion of the liberal arts, and these are tough times for all of us and for colleges like Reid. I value so much, as Hugh was saying earlier, the way that people have stepped forward and sent kind words and sent words to help think about how we can all support one another. We're in this together. It means a great deal to have your support. And so we also need advocates. So when you're able to cheerlead for the college and help, prospective students, their families, whatever your sphere of influence is to understand that what we do is precious and valuable. That is really important work. And then if you're able to join me in philanthropically supporting the college, this is a time when we are going to be challenged and will be for years, as will our students who we seek to help. So if you're in a position to make a gift to the college, I do invite you to become an annual fund donor. Those funds are funds that we use to help keep the college running, and it's truly the best way to support Reid. We also need volunteers, and I know Melissa's going to talk to you more about how you can volunteer. This weekend offers a myriad of opportunities to learn how to get involved, and so the session that Melissa hosts promises to be fun. I know there are more activities tomorrow, including getting to hear from students who did internships, and so I hope that you're able to take part in all of that. Again, I long for the time when we can be in a room together. This is not a substitute for that. And I so appreciate your time and your care and concern for the college. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for all you do for Reid. And I'm gonna hand the floor over to Melissa and say farewell. Thanks so much.